So Acts chapter number 12, the Bible says this: about that time, Herod the king laid violent hands on some who belonged to the church. He killed James, the brother of John, with a sword, and when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. This was during the days of unleavened bread. And when he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering over to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him. Dude, listen, Peter, you are the man if they put 4, I don't know how much a squad is, but it's more than one. Whenever they put that many people to guard you, you must have some firepower. 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out to the people. So Peter was kept in prison, but I love this, but earnest prayer. Somebody say earnest prayer. For him was made to God by the church. Now when Herod was about to bring him out, on that very night, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries before the door were guarding the prison. I mean, he is in extreme, maximum security. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to him, and a light shone on the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him, saying, "Get up quickly," and the chains fell off his hands. And the angel said to him, "Dress yourself and put on your sandals." And he did so, and he said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." And he went out and followed him. He did not know what was being done by the angel was real, but he thought he was seeing a vision. And he's just dreaming all of this. When they passed the first and the second guard, they came to the iron gate leading into the city, and it opened for them on its own accord. Gates just swung open by themselves. And they went out and went along one street, and immediately the angel left him. When Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I'm sure that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all the Jewish people were expecting." When he realized this, he went to the house. Somebody say, to the house. He went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other name was Mark, where many were gathered together and were praying. When he knocked at the door of the gateway, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. Recognizing Peter's voice, in her joy, she didn't even open up the gate. She got so excited, but ran in and reported that Peter was standing at the gate. They said to her, "You, sweetheart, are out of your mind." But she kept insisting that it was so, and they kept saying, "It's his angel." But Peter continued knocking, and when they opened, they saw him and were amazed, but motioning to him with his hand to be silent, motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had brought him out of prison. And he said, "Tell these things to James and to the brothers." Then he departed and went to another place. This story, I think, is significant for where we're at as a church, hopefully where you're at as an individual. Have you ever, I've done this, and you look at the point of view of the church here. They're praying earnestly. They're getting business done in prayer. And they're so intent on prayer that the very thing they're praying for shows up. And they're like, "No, I don't have, I'm praying about this." She's like, "Peter's outside." They're like, "No, Peter, we're praying for Peter." She's like, "No, he's outside." He can't be outside. We're praying for him. Yeah, have you ever been in a place where the very thing you were praying for just showed up? And it catches you so off guard, you're like, "Well, I'm meant for this to happen, but I don't know if I'm ready for it," kind of a thing. You know, I watched that even this week. One of our people here in one of our micro churches was praying about a particular situation, and we were talking to her and kind of walking through some things, and she had prayed some things first thing that morning. By 10 o'clock, they showed up where she was at, and it was like, God is up to some things here. And this is exactly what happens here. It was so unexpected that they could not even believe it. So here's what I want to do really quickly this morning as we talk about church stories. You know, there are some weird things that happen at church. I don't know if you have been in church for any length of time. Tyler, have you seen some weird things in church? I've seen some weird things in church. I've seen some really miraculous things in church. I've seen some dumb things in church. There are a lot of good church stories. And it doesn't, it goes way farther back than just us. If you read your Bible, the Bible said that there was a time when Paul was out preaching, and he just preached and preached and preached. You thought I was bad. He preached and preached and preached so long and so boring that someone in the balcony fell asleep, fell out of the balcony and died. He preached him to death. Man, but then it wasn't over then. So Paul then, if you preach somebody to death, then you have the responsibility of praying them back to life. And so that's exactly what Paul did. Paul preached him dead, and then he prayed him to life again. And I'm sure he preached for a long time more after that. I've never been in a service where, someone got bored, fell asleep, and fell out of the balcony and died. I have been in the service where someone got bored and fell asleep. I have been in the service where someone died. I'm telling you, there are some crazy church stories. I could tell you some church stories from the other side of the world where the culture is a little different than ours. Some things that are going on in the congregation while you're trying to lead worship, and you end up having to lead worship like this, Just church stories. And I want to kind of dive into this and pull some things out of what we see in this church story here, because this is a pretty good one. Now, here's where we have to begin, because although this ends really well, right? Like Peter miraculously gets free, but it doesn't start out that way. It starts out pretty bad. It starts out with King Herod taking one of the central figures of the church and martyrs him. And because he was popular by doing so, he decides, well, that worked out pretty well. I'll do it again. And so then he arrests Peter, intending to martyr Peter the very next day, too. So Peter at this point is in prison, guarded by how many ever people he's guarded by? Multiple chains chaining him down. He's sitting between two prison guards, and there's more at the door. And the Bible said that this was his last night, like he had had his final meal, because the Bible said that Herod intended to bring him out soon after that to execute him. Like it was right there on the verge. This is deep in the fourth quarter kind of a thing. And the Bible says that Peter's just sitting there, and I don't understand how I can't sleep on good days sometimes. If anybody ever struggles to go to sleep, you feel what I'm talking about, where you lay there and you just think about all the things. I was doing that way early this morning, just all the thoughts. But Peter somehow is facing execution the next morning, and he's asleep. Hate you. And the angel of the Lord wakes him up. Now, here's what I want to tell us about this church story. Number one, this story is a hopeless story. This story has only one ending, and that is Peter's about to die. And here's the deal. He is in a really, really bad situation. He's in prison, being guarded by 4 squads, how many of that is, of soldiers. Herod was about to bring him out to execute him. And it's really easy for us to look past the difficulty of this situation because we know the end of the story, right? Because we read it in 17 verses. We read the whole story. We know how it ends. And it's really easy to push past the difficulty of the beginning because we know how good the ending is. And this is where this matters to me, because as a church, right, as a collection of microchurches, we cannot celebrate the difficulties, or we can't celebrate rather the victory of the ending without understanding and embracing the difficulty of the beginning. This is why we so easily dismiss each other. It's just kind of write each other off. Because you see me as I am right now. You don't know where I came from. You don't know what I was in whenever God found me. And it's really easy to write each other off. But we cannot celebrate the victory of the ending without embracing the difficulty of the beginning. So here's what we're talking about this morning. Therein lies the value of living out this faith journey together. This is why this is important. Because when we struggle together, we appreciate each other. I don't know if you've ever had a workout partner and you leave it all there and you are just about ready to go out back and meet Pukey. Somebody know what I'm talking about. And like you're laying there in your sweat angel on the floor and you look over to the person who just did the same exact thing you did and you're like, and you don't have to say anything, but you have this connection because you went through the same struggle together. And I'm going to tell you something, gym buddies are the best buddies. Like, you understand each other, you have sweated together, you have cried together, you have hovered over the trash can together. Like, you've got a special connection, right? Therein lies the value of a church family, because there's some things going to happen in your life. And whenever I walk my struggles out with someone else, at the end of it, I can look at you and you can look at me, Tyler, and we know what we went through, and we don't have to say a thing. And we got kind of that, you know where I've been and I know where you've been, because we've lived this thing out together. I cannot embrace the victory of the end without understanding that I will have to go through some difficulties in the here and now. Let me tell you some bad news. I can't know God as a healer unless I've been sick. I can read about it, I can learn about it, but I don't know Him like that. I can't know God as a Savior unless I've been lost. That's why we can talk about all this thing, but God is best experienced, or best understood by experience. That's why David said, taste and see that the Lord is good. Just try it out for yourself, because there are some things in this walk with Christ that you just can't get unless you go through them. Did you know that God, and I know you do know this, but I'm going to remind you, works in the most impossible situations? Biblically, God does His best work in the worst situations. Israel wins the best victories when they're down to like 300 soldiers. That's what Gideon would tell you. God will do his biggest, most miraculous stuff whenever you can't figure it out. And so here's the good news for me this morning. Whenever I'm facing something that is almost impossible, that seems like it's absolutely hopeless, that is a good candidate for God to get involved. For the situation in your life that you can't figure a way out, that's a good candidate for God to step in. Because guess what? Only He can get the credit in that moment. The fact that Peter shows up at the door and is knocking on the gate outside, there is no way to tell that story unless you leave room for God got involved. But how much of our story do we tell? And it could happen with God, and it could happen without God. And we tell the whole thing, and there's no place where there's really this spot where you go, I can't explain this unless you throw this whole supernatural factor that just God showed up in the midst of it. We were talking about experiencing God this week, the Bible study. We call those God-sized things. You know, it's things that only God can do. I hope there are some places in your life. I hope you can tell a story that cannot be explained unless you just leave room for, I don't know, God did it. That's a good place to live, because God does His best work in the worst situations. I said you could ask Gideon, he would tell you that. You look at the woman with the issue of blood in Mark that said, you know, she for 12 years had gotten more sick and more sick and more sick, but she heard of Jesus and said, if He is who He says He is, if I just touch His robe, I know I'll be healed. He does His best work in the worst situations. When He's looking at 5,000 hungry people and He says, what do we got? And they say, well, boss, we got 5 loaves of bread and we got 2 anchovies. He's like, that's enough, because God does His best work in the worst situation. Here's what I'm believing for your life. I believe that God wants to do His best work in your worst situation. Because so many times I'm conditioned to believe that God is doing His best work in my best situation. That's why it is what it is. But I believe that we need to flip that on its head a little bit and understand that the thing that's the worst in your life, that's the very candidate that God wants to get involved. He does His best work in the worst areas. And you know what? Peter's asleep and he never even sees it coming. And I hope that's the case with you as well. I hope you never even see it coming. That God shows up this week and begins moving in a situation that you'd written off as hopeless, just like this one. But then God shows up. So this story was a hopeless story. We've alluded to it already. Secondly, this story is a God-sized story. It's a story that can only be told in a way that gives God this, just this X factor, this fill in the blank, I don't know how it happened except Him. I love verse 5 here. As we're writing, Luke pins down here in verse number 5. He said, so Peter was kept in prison, but earnest prayer was made for him to God by the church. And here's what we see. We see that undeniably it was prayer that brought him out. It was God answering the people of God who were praying fervently on behalf of Peter. And here's what I believe, and I don't know, your theology may differ. I don't believe that it was like a praying over a ham sandwich type prayer they were doing. Like, God bless Peter. Amen. I believe that there was something in them that was so like fixated on getting him out. They were so intent that they wouldn't even recognize that he was at the door, right? Like they were in business. They were, the old folks used to call this ringing the prayer bells of heaven. You have to go back to bells for that to even make sense. But being in this place where you are in touch, we used to sing an old, like a hymn, redback song about prayer bells of heaven, how sweetly they ring. Call him up and tell him what you want. Just understanding that there's this place where I can mean business with God. It is a God-sized story that makes room and is made possible through the power of prayer. And it was prayer that brought him out of prison. Of course, it was the angel of the Lord that showed up and did the work. But it was a direct result of the fact that the church was praying for Peter. This is, we had one of our micro churches at the house Monday night, and sometimes Krista Shea, most of the time, always, is a better preacher than I am. And so we were sitting there, and we were talking about prayer, and she said, prayer is such a powerful tool that sometimes we just kind of relegate to being a crutch. Just kind of use it as like kind of the get-me-by thing. She said, but it's powerful. It's real. Here's what 2 Corinthians said in verse number 10, or chapter number 10, verse number 3. Paul said, "For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh." This is what I was talking about a moment ago whenever Judge Derek called and said, "Justin, the battle you guys are fighting is more than just physical, it's spiritual." This is what he's talking about. Paul said, "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but we have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to punish disobedience when your obedience is complete." It is a direct result of God working through prayer. And I want to remind somebody that prayer is not just like a last thing you do after you eat and are about to go to bed, like, "Oh, God, be with me tomorrow." But the fact is, if I'm a child of God, I've got a direct line to heaven. And when I pray and whenever I just kind of throw myself into that, heaven and earth can move because I pray to a God who can speak and chaos is brought to order. He can stand on the boat and speak and the waves cease. And there is no doubt that the same God who did that then is listening right now. You know what's sad? Most people don't consider themselves to be good prayers. If I went and asked everybody, are you good at prayer? Almost 100% would go, yeah, I pray, but I don't know that I'm good at it. And we carry around this insecurity about whether or not we pray good enough. Anybody, have you ever faced that before? Where you wanted to see God move in your life, but you feel like you didn't pray good enough for it to happen? Come on, church folks, say amen. Where I feel like I need to say the right words in the right order, almost like it's a magic chant or something. Like I've got to get the combination right of time spent fasting and words said in prayer, and I've got to make sure that I've read 10 verses in my Bible, and I've got to quote them just right. And if I get all this in line, maybe, just maybe, Jesus will unlock the magic door and a blessing will fall out of it. It's like this combination lock. Most of us feel insecure about our prayer life. Most of us try to pray and feel like we're really not getting a whole lot done. And it's easy, because most of us aren't, as followers of Jesus, we're not falling into this trap where we're living in sin, but most of us live far below our means because we believe a lie about our own prayer life. I was looking at some statistics and some Barna research this week, and I was not surprised, but the quantifiables of that are a bit mind-boggling. And they were saying that most people, and listen, I don't care how you pray. I don't care where, I don't care how, I don't care if you close your eyes or open your eyes, if you stand up, if you kneel down, if you run in circles, I don't care. Don't bother me a bit. I pray best when my feet are walking. That's just the way I am. But it was saying that most, like 82% of people only pray silently by themselves. Period. And this is 82% of praying people. People who they determined prayed at least once in the last 2 months was their criteria. Those are praying people. Bless my peanut butter jelly sandwich. Amen. Counts. So quantify this how you want to. It's hard to put a number on this. But 82% of the people that say they were people of prayer had only and consistently prayed silently by themselves. That's fine. If you pray silently by yourself, I'm good with that. 2% of those said that they at some point regularly prayed audibly with other believers. And you may say, well, I don't feel comfortable doing, yeah, they need to be one person praying at a time, and that's good. And that's fine. That's not my point. My point is this, though. That's not what that church looked like in Acts. My heart, our desire at Hub City Church is to replicate what the church in the book of Acts looked like. And the here and now culture and what's popular, what's faddish, I don't really care. My goal is to replicate what the early church did. That's why we're all in on microchurch. Because that's what it looked like. And the Bible said that they were making fervent prayer to God. So here's what I imagine. I imagine that they weren't all in their own little corner praying silently by themselves. I think that scene didn't look like that. I think that scene was they were bound together, they were holding hands, and they were calling out to God to move in Peter's life. Why? Because time is getting real close. We're desperate by now. And so I'm not telling you how you need to pray by yourself, but I am telling you this. These statistics prove what I'm telling you, in that people are insecure to pray. And you ask somebody to pray in a group, they're like, yeah, you've been in microchurch, right? And you ask somebody to pray, they're like, the color like washes out of their face, and it's like you ask them to sing the national anthem or something. You want me to pray out loud in a group. Here's my point. I think that should be a common spiritual practice among believers. Get mad with it if you want to. I think that is what the early church looked like. Bottom line is this. You and I, most of the time, are insecure about prayer. We feel like we don't do it good enough. We don't say the right words. We don't pray long enough. We don't pray short enough. Whatever the case is, we just don't do it right. And because I don't do it right, I'm just not... Just call on somebody else. But it's an unmistakable, undeniable fact that the biblical New Testament church of Acts looked more like a church that was willing to pray together. As a matter of fact, it is an unmistakable, undeniable fact that the New Testament church of Acts looked like a microchurch more than it did a Sunday morning. Guess what? Those were good church folks. They were good Jews, most of them. They went to synagogue. They still went and worshiped. They still gathered at the temple. They still did all the stuff. But on Tuesdays, they were together. And they were sharing life together. And they were sharing meals together. So this is, number one, it's a hopeless story. Number two, it's a God-sized story that is unlocked by the power of prayer. Let me just say as a side note to that on prayer, because I wanted to say this and I kind of skipped past it, but the power of prayer, I want somebody to catch this, doesn't rest on the ability of the one who prays. It rests in the ability of the one who hears. You can't pray it done, but you can pray and He can get it done. I've got to learn that prayer is not a performance. We had one of our own this past semester. We were in a service and she did like a spoken word thing. And I was like, man, that's good. And she's going through this whole, it was like 2 minutes worth of, she had this whole thing memorized and kind of going through it, killing it. And I was like, that's impressive that she has that like down, and the articulation and the words and like the whole flow of it. It was impressive. And so many times I take that mentality and think that's the way I've got to go to God. Like I get my spiritual and theological words, my ammunition right, and I run into God's presence. I'm like, and I quote the verse that I memorized, and I say the thing, and I make sure I throw, good Father in there or something. I get all the adjectives right, and I do it so well that I just know He's going to move. All the while, God was wanting me to come into His presence and just pour my heart out, because I can't perform prayer. It's an invitation for Him to join my life. And then when I spend enough time inviting Him, I get there and I realize He's been inviting me the whole time. And it's this mutual calling to each other to come closer and closer and closer and not build some kind of performance. Let me move on. I'm going to leave there. So it's a hopeless story. It's a God-sized story. And then finally, this story is a microchurch story. When Peter left that prison cell, he didn't go to the temple. When he left there, he didn't go to the synagogue. When he left there, he didn't go to the church house to wait for them to open the door so they could have Sunday morning service. The Bible says when Peter left that place in the middle of the night, he went to the house of Mary. Because he knew the church was going to be gathered there. Listen, before you get all weird with me and think that I'm trying to put us in a commune, I'm like, that dude needs to settle down a little bit because he's that's weird. I'm with you. I'm weird. But I'm with you that we shouldn't be doing that. All right. But I am calling us to live in a faith community. Why? Because that's biblical. That's what they did. And I've got no good ideas apart from what I see right here. Peter didn't leave and go to the synagogue, didn't go to the church building. He went to a Christian home where the church was gathered. And as I'll say again, it was an unmistakable fact that the biblical New Testament Church of Acts looked more like a microchurch than it did a Sunday morning service. I refuse to put all of our effort and all of our resources into a Sunday morning service. And you know what? We're here. And it costs a little bit, and that's fine. And the lighting's not great. And I've got what Jerry DeFatta called the Garden of Gethsemane behind me here. He's like, yeah, I saw you preaching in front of the Garden of Eden. He called it the Garden of Eden, Garden of Gethsemane both. He's like, I see you with it in the background there. I was like, yeah, if I could cover that thing up, I would. Said, I'm trying to get away from your noisy air conditioners, what I'm trying to do. And so it's not great. We don't have pipe and drape all over the place and flashing signs and fireworks and because it is irresponsible for me to take the resources God has given us and create some kind of spectacle with them when I know that the biblical church of Acts did not look that way. Here's what we're going to do. And those of you that are giving to Hub City Church, we're going to have a nice place. We're going to have a great facility. We're going to have a place where we can come and be comfortable and worship. And we're going to have coffee and whatever else. We're going to have coffee. I don't know if they drank coffee or not, but they should have. In the New Testament church, they should have drank coffee. It would have made them better Christians. If they did, God would have heard them better. Just joking. We're going to have coffee. We're going to have the stuff. We'll have lights. I'll have my cute little Hub City neon sign hanging up somewhere. Like, we're going to do all that stuff, but I refuse to take all of our resources and dump them on Sunday morning. Because that is one of the most irresponsible things I could do. And knowing that God is raising up microchurch leaders who are meeting in homes, who God is doing something, and He's about to reach this community and ultimately reach the world through these people who are taking their time and their effort and gathering together and being the church on a Monday or a Wednesday or a Thursday or whatever the case is, not just on Sunday morning. That's where we're at. We have a vision, we have a heart to shift our thinking back to this model in the early church. That's what we're doing. And that's not going to fit everybody's mindset. It's not going to fit everybody's agenda. I don't care. That's fine. But this shift turns everything upside down. Next week, we're going to talk some about what this shift means as a church. And it's going to be, next week, I'd love for you to be here. It's going to be really nuts and bolts. Like, it's not going to be hyper spiritual. It's going to be really like logistic. What does this look like on Tuesdays kind of stuff? We're going to talk about what this shift does to everything, because it turns some stuff upside down. When we shift our focus away from macro church, this gathering, we're going to keep gathering, we're going to keep worshiping, but when we shift our intents and our focuses from there to a micro church, your couch becomes the pew. Your coffee table becomes like a pulpit. The front door of the church becomes the front door of your house. And I'm not saying everybody here has to host a micro church, but I would love, here's what we've done for the past few weeks. Our micro church attendance has surpassed our Sunday morning attendance. I am fired up about that. I am pumped up about it. Why? Because this is where real stuff's going to happen. This is where, because people will come to your house that won't come here. People will come to your house that won't come to 625 Main Street, but will come to your house and feel comfortable and feel welcome. And all of a sudden, a new believer gets to experience the same God that a veteran is experiencing. Someone who's never been in church before gets to see God moving in the real life of someone who they're sitting beside. And it's not just the pastor serving out of the pot of preaching mashed potatoes to you. Because I refuse to ration out the gospel to you. Where we come on Sunday and I'm like, here's yours and here's yours and here's yours. And, well, I'm just not getting fed, Pastor. Well, I'm coming around. I'll get there eventually. We can't do that. That's not sustainable. But when we take responsibility to be the church and gather together and worship together and gather together and take communion together and gather together and be the church, I'm telling you something. People who are in prison will start showing up. People who are shackled will start showing up. The Peters that we're praying for will start knocking on the door and we'll go, wait, you can't be. Listen, there are people on these pews here this morning that never were a part of Hub City Church, but they began as a name in a notebook during a micro church, and we wrote their name down, and all of a sudden they showed up. Can I tell you something? When we act out the biblical model, God just blesses it and blesses it and blesses it. Some of you are here and have a testimony and have a story, and that story is a micro church story. When we make that shift, the entry point goes from being Sunday morning church to the potluck dinner you have on Wednesday night or whatever it is. That's the entry point, and that is sustainable. Because here's what you already know, and I don't want to admit, I'm not a dynamic or good enough preacher to draw the masses in on Sunday. We're not investing in the things that's going to make that work. If this church plant succeeds, it's because we did the business of building a micro church. What I see in this story is that there was a church gathered in a home making fervent prayer. What I see in this story was that there is a person who was in a bad situation who had a really desperate need. And what I see in this story is a God who showed up and connected those two together. Took the prayers that were being prayed and acted out on behalf of the one that they were praying for. And when God got involved, God-sized things happen when these three intersect. Here's where we're closing this morning. Tyler, you guys come out. Get your worship team up here. We're going to close out in some worship today. Randy, you and Lauren, come on up here too. We're just going to spend some time with the Lord in closing this morning. Today is an introduction to what I've had in my heart but not done a great job of articulating. We're going to re-emphasize this next week, and I want to give you some nuts and bolts of what it looks like to be a micro-church next week. Kind of what our heart is for that, what that'll look like in 5 years, hopefully, what it'll look like in 10 years, what it could look like for you and your family. We're excited. We've got people who, in the next, they were moving this month, and she ended up having a wreck and got pins in her hands and everything else. Got people moving from Florida to come join the team to plant a micro church. Got people moving, a whole team of people moving from Arkansas to Hattiesburg, not because of anything other than they're coming here to build a micro church. I want Sunday morning to be like a family reunion of all these micro churches that get together and go, that worship God together, that seek Him together, because that's what it looked like here. I don't care what it looks like downtown. I don't care what it looks like in Oak Grove, Sumrall, Gulfport, Jackson, or anywhere else. I care what it looked like right here. Today, here's your challenge. Here's where I'm going to poke and prod you a little bit, because it wouldn't be a Sunday unless I was like, had my pitchfork out poking you with it, right? This is what I do. Here's my challenge for you. If you're not connected to a microchurch, and I'll look across here and almost everyone is. If you're not connected to one, that's your challenge this week. Because if you only are involved with Sunday morning at Hub City Church, you're like, wow, this is bland. The salt and pepper happens during the week. We're kind of meat and potatoes here on Sunday morning, right? The Tony Shashery shows up on Wednesday night. That Tony, I got to clap on that, man. Said so much good stuff this morning, I got clapped on Tony's. Listen, Tony's is worth clapping for until you get a hold of some stuff called Fiesta seasoning. And I had to go all the way to South America to find it. It's a special brand of it. You don't know nothing about it. The good stuff happens during the week. The worship's good. The preaching's okay. Sunday. I love spending time with each other and worshiping together and being in the church. But man, the life change that we're seeing is happening on Mondays and Wednesdays right now. So my poking and prodding this morning is if you are not connected to a micro church, we would love to invite you to do that. We're getting ready we just launched one a couple weeks ago on Monday nights with our college students. We're getting ready to launch another one that hopefully will be a little more accommodating to adults and those with kids. Right now we're meeting every other Monday night at my house with our college students. We'll probably throw some Monday nights out there where every other of the other Monday nights will be on the off nights will be with our adults, with some families. And my heart, listen, I want to get together with parents and just kind of share life together. My heart, though, is for my kids and your kids to get together with somebody and them go through the Discovery Bible Study together. And someone ask them what they are praying about. And have a place where our parents can kind of share life, but at the same time our kids can share life also. Because if I'm making time for middle school football and I'm not making time for them to develop their walk with Jesus, what am I doing? So if you're not connected with that, the same place I pointed you to earlier, that hubcity.link, there's a button on that page of links there that just says connect to a microchurch. And if you're not, just hit it, put your name there, and we're about to work on that. That's it. That's like the spiritual challenge of the week. It's easy. We'll follow up with you. We'll get you connected. If you are already connected, I want to challenge you this week. And like I said, most of you already are. So as we gather together and we do our micro churches, I want to challenge you this week to gather together and believe in faith for God to do something that's so big that only Him being involved can explain it. Let's start praying for some things that are bigger than us. It's so easy to get together and be like, well, I'm just praying that the Lord will help us clean this sound system up at the end of service. That God will bless us in our work. Knowing good and well that if God don't get involved, it's still going to happen, right? But what if I shift my focus from things that can happen and begin praying for the people who are spiritually like Peter in prison, who are shackled up and hopeless, and there is no way they're getting out? I hope you don't mind me sharing this. Before you ever showed up, before this family was ever here, their name was written in my notebook from last year sometime. And to hear the story, there's so many places in that story where you can't explain it unless you just say, well, God must have got involved. That's what we're looking for. I want you to stand with us all over the sanctuary this morning. We're going to close out today in worship and prayer. We're just going to spend some time with Him. We'll give you an opportunity, and as we do. If you need prayer with something, we'll pray with you. That is our honor. That's like what we do.